It's a truly global organization across all types of asset classes. They had investments in over 10,000 companies. And I thought, wow, what impact we could have with almost $1 trillion to put to work, right?
Yeah, for a good cause.
Absolutely.
Can you feel it? Feel the heat. Can you feel it? So much you can do. Can you feel it? Can you feel the heat? Can you feel it?
Hi everyone, welcome to a very special international edition of Planetary Business, the podcast that teaches you how to run a company while staying within the planetary boundaries. In this episode, I'm going to do something which is like nothing else I've ever done in my life. I am so proud, I'm so humbled, I'm honored, I'm so excited to present to you a true role model, a shining example of courage, integrity, and impact. I'm talking about Desiree Fixler, the whistleblower of DWS. Flashback, May 31st, 2022. 50 prosecutors and police officers of the Bundeskriminalamt raid Deutsche Bank and DWS. DWS is the investment arm of Deutsche Bank and one of the world's leading asset managers with over 800 billion euros of assets under management. The prosecutors gather evidence that only a fraction of the investments DWS publicly claimed to be sustainable actually met the ESG criteria. As a result, the share price of DWS falls by 14%, and the CEO, the COO, and the CIO have to resign. Today, the investigations are still underway, but we can already say that the DWS scandal was the first big case of greenwashing in the financial sector that led to fundamental legal consequences. It's an important case study of colossal corporate governance failure and a game changer everyone should be aware of. It's a wake-up call for any company that has to perform in a system of stakeholders who demand truly sustainable products. I have now the privilege to welcome in my show Desiree Fixler, the woman who caused the earthquake. Thanks for being here, Desiree, and congratulations for making this bold move.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Desiree, you have been dubbed the DWS whistleblower. What does the word whistleblower mean to you?
Whistleblower to me means somebody who fights for justice, somebody who wants to reform a company and organization. Unfortunately, in our world today, I also know that whistleblower sometimes comes with a negative connotation. The biggest impact I want to make after this whole saga is to recast the whistleblower as someone who is trying to do something good in protection of the organization, in protection of his or her colleagues.
In order to show loyalty, right?
Absolutely. Look, we're all human. At any given time in a large organization, something's going wrong. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's unintentional. And that's what senior leadership and management is about. At the end of the day, a CEO, a big chunk of his time is risk management. How do you effectively deal with the challenges that come? And what's most important is that senior leadership is in the know, that there is a very healthy speak-up culture. Without that information, it just compounds the problem, and a problem becomes a catastrophe.
Catastrophe. I think that's a very good word to describe what we're going to talk about in the next couple of minutes. I bet your story is going to premiere on Netflix very soon. Who would you like to play your part?
I really haven't given it much thought, but I was at a summit and we were discussing what had happened at Deutsche Bank DWS, and I was interrupted, and an executive said, "Oh my goodness, oh my God, Desiree, this has to be a movie." And a second person then jumped in and said, "Oh, and I know who should play you." And I looked over and she said, "Natalie Portman." I'm like,
absolutely.
I could live with that one.
I was Googling the most successful actresses in the world, looking for somebody who would look a bit like you. She's absolutely the one. Could you give me, please, one suggestion also for the cast for one of the bad guys?
Oh my goodness. But boy, we could have a lot of fun with the casting for the bad actors.
Okay, but thinking about it, Christian Sewing, the head of Deutsche Bank, I think he looks a little bit like Matt Damon, don't you think?
Well, that's interesting.
That's nice of me to say,
That
isn't
is
it?
very nice, yes.
Until then, you might want to tell us in your own words what happened. I'd love you to walk us through this outrageous course of events. I guess many of our listeners have read some articles or headlines on the case, but it's definitely something else to hear it from you firsthand.
Sure.
And afterwards, I would like to discuss with you how you see the world today, how the scandal has affected the way people do business, not just in your industry, but in all industries, in fact, and what every one of us can learn about transparency and good governance. There are a lot of takeaways here. So maybe let's start with who you were before you joined DWS, Desiree. Who were you?
The same person, perhaps not as outspoken. But I was working in ESG impact investing when I got a call to meet with DWS, and I had known that they were looking for a chief sustainability officer. That was in the press. So when I got the call to meet with the CEO, Azoka Verman of DWS, I was thrilled. It really sounded like an absolute dream job. I mean, my goodness. I mean, DWS is a huge asset manager. It's a truly global organization across all types of asset classes. And I thought, wow, what impact we could have with almost $1 trillion to put to work, right?
Yeah, for a good cause.
Absolutely.
When was that?
I started at the beginning of June 2020.
Which situation was DWS in at that time?
There were a lot of issues. The Deutsche Bank group was being subject to a number of pretty severe investigations, regulatory investigations. So first of all, Deutsche Bank was being investigated, and this affected also the asset manager, was being investigated for ignoring suspicious activities for one of their clients, Jeffrey Epstein. So the SEC was investigating what happened there, the equivalent to the BaFin in the US. And another US regulator, the CFTC, was investigating loose financial controls at Deutsche Bank effectively and the asset manager. And the problems were so severe on the reporting side that the US regulator threatened to shut down DWS as an investment advisor across the US because their IT systems and reporting systems were not robust and clear enough.
So there was already something going on with respect to compliance. See?
Yes.
They were already in trouble when
Yes.
you came.
You also had the unfolding of the Wirecard scandal, and DWS had an outsized position in Wirecard. So it was a tumultuous time when I joined.
And they hired you to be a change maker.
Yes, that was the word that was used. They wanted to make this hire an external hire. They wanted a fresh pair of eyes to assess the platform and make the needed changes.
Sounds great so far. Let's now jump to March 2021. That was when DWS released its annual report, and it claimed to be a leader in the ESG market with more than half of all the company's assets meeting environmental, social, and corporate governance criteria. And we're talking here about 460 billion, I say that again, 460 billion euros that qualified as sustainable investments according to DWS. And the stock market loved the announcement. So that was what the outside world was able to see. Desiree, you were inside of the company. What were you seeing back then?
A very different picture. This is 2020. It's not unusual for a large asset manager to be struggling on how to meet the growing demand for ESG investment products. There's a dislocation between the high demand for product and the low supply of product. And remember, the ESG agenda was incredibly accelerated by the response to COVID. There was tremendous social unrest. For example, the whole movement like Black Lives Matters. And so a lot of CEOs felt under tremendous pressure to make bold statements. And this is a story at the end of the day of colossal corporate governance failure, where the CEO and the management board made the decision to take the shortcut, to present themselves as a savvier and a more advanced ESG asset manager than they were in reality. The reality was that internally, we weren't aligned. There was a great deal of confusion. We did not have the systems in place to produce the right type of products. So there was a lot of turmoil within the company at this time.
The CEO of DWS, Asoka Wörmann was his name,
Yes.
publicly boasted that ESG was at the heart of everything his company was doing. People believed him at that time, and he said that all the assets under management had run through a highly sophisticated tracking system to identify ESG risks. What did you know about that system at that time?
Well, I was confused because I had also read this marketing material and I read the statements about the system. The system was called Smart Integration, and it relied on an ESG database called the ESG Engine. And internally, when I was introduced to both the Smart Integration framework and the ESG Engine, folks described it as, quote, shit, quote, having high operational risk. And I was confused because I looked at the press releases and the public statements, which describe these systems as sophisticated using artificial intelligence, world class.
All the buzzwords.
Yep. Also, I was confused because I heard about the firm's use of artificial intelligence, advanced machine learning. And I asked the global head of research, does the ESG system use AI? And on email, I had a response, no. So there was a tremendous gap between external communication and internal reality.
All that glitters ain't gold. Everybody who's ever worked in a company knows that. But in this case, the system must have been really dysfunctional. Now listen, everybody out there. According to this rating system that the DWS had in 21, the flagship ESG fund had as a top position for strong corporate governance Wirecard as a role model for strong corporate governance. Desiree, how could they have gotten away with that at DWS?
Here is like the real kicker. This report is dated June 2020. The CEO has already been arrested and the company has fallen into insolvency. Yet it maintains the second highest rating. Something is wrong here.
So I imagine it's always overwhelming when you come into a new company. You have to understand how it works, meet new people. What was going on in your mind when you figured out there is something wrong? Is it me or is it everybody else? Am I
Well,
the crazy one or the other ones?
You're disoriented. I think that's the good description. You deny defense mechanisms or coping mechanisms kick in, and you kind of deny what's happening, and you rationalize it. So when I raised all of these red flags, I expected a feeling of urgency amongst the management board members. I report directly to the CEO, but I'm presenting my assessment of their platform to the entire Vorstand. And I deliver this because it took some time to conduct investigations and to work. I mean, this is a big company. I put together the report at the beginning of November and presented to the Vorstand then. And I'm expecting a very almost emotional response from the board members because I'm raising significant red flags. And so I'm expecting them to sound the alarms, all hands on deck. We need to resolve these problems. Instead, the reception was the polar opposite. It was just blank stares, no sense of urgency. The meeting was adjourned, and I was encouraged to continue investigating. There were a lot of poker faces at the table. At this time, you know what happens in your head? You kind of say, well, maybe this is a cultural difference. I'm now working at a European company. Maybe they need time to process what I've said. Maybe it's so severe in a board meeting, they don't give me answers that this is a little different. They'll come back to me in time and give me the green light on the action plan I've just given them.
So you were still optimistic.
Absolutely, yes. Remember something, that this was all fixable, and I had found enough allies within the company. We were working well together. We were all waiting for management to give us the green light, on the action plan to fix what was going wrong at the company.
And what happened then?
Nothing. That's what's so astounding. Absolutely nothing. My boss, the CEO, comes back to say, you know what, Desiree, you need a sustainability council. Now, the Sustainability Council, because he's directed me to do this, has over 30 people on it. It's impossible to get consensus amongst 30 people to all be on the same page. He also made sure that the council had no decision-making ability. So it's already from the get-go a lame duck.
So he just kept you busy.
Yes. And then as I keep pounding the table, and again, now my sense of urgency is increasing and I'm becoming more aggressive because we're running out of time. I know that the annual report, we need to finish this by February, right? It's going to come out in March. And so again, I'm saying, guys, I need an answer. We went through this whole process of putting together a sustainability council. It has no decision-making ability. I need the decisions from you guys. And the response I got is, Desiree, you're right. We need a transformation committee. So they make us form a transformation committee.
Do you think that any one of those stakeholders, especially in the executive board, understand where we're at right now, understand the planetary emergency, and that we need to have solutions for that?
Did they feel it was their responsibility to make an impact? No, absolutely not. They did not feel that responsibility. They wanted to be an ESG leading asset manager because they knew that was the biggest growth market in asset management. And so what they saw as a savior for their bottom line was ESG. And their focus on ESG was simply for profit.
March 12th, that's the date when they release the annual report with the false data. And until then, you are still fighting to make sure that the investors and the consumers don't get the false data.
Absolutely.
It doesn't work out. And now it's the day before the release of the annual report, and they fire you. How did that happen? Did somebody come to you and say, I'm sorry, Desiree, it's not working out?
No, that definitely did not happen. Stephanie, I had a meeting with Azoka and everything seemed business as usual. I walked into the meeting, and on this day, this was the first tough meeting I had with Azoka. We sat down and he said, no good news. Everybody hates you. Nobody like you. Nobody like you. Everybody hates you. Hates you. And Azoka, most people know, he's an emotional character. And I sat there and I was dazed and confused. Clearly, a CEO doesn't speak like this. And so I'm waiting for his punchline. And he just keeps ranting and getting more emotional. Bad communicate.
Is his English that bad? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Which is strange because the corporate language, of course, is English.
Oh my God.
Then one of his assistants walked in and interrupted. I don't know what's going on. And so obviously I'm making calls to, the most senior people at the company, and they're all saying the same thing. That's Azoka. He loses his temper a lot. Don't worry. So at this time, I'm kind of going through the motions and just thinking, what the hell is going on here? And I have my bonus call in March, on March 3rd. And I'm told that my individual performance is perfect. The individual contribution is 100%. So I get an A+, on my performance. But then, of course, I think it was March 12th. That was the first day I couldn't log on to the system. And Azoka hired a lawyer, and Mr. Anus, in my circles, he was called Mr. Aspel. Mr. Anus, an unfortunate name. Mr. Anus writes to me and says that the company has issued my termination, that it's been mailed to my home in Frankfurt.
You were fired. Did you at that time talk to the supervisory board?
So at this point, I understand I need to reach out to the supervisory board because I got fired, I think it says March 11th. On March 12th, the annual report came out. And of course, I went through all my sections. I had editing rights. And I realized they rejected all of my comments, my edits, and they went out with all the hyperbole. They went out with the misrepresentation, the misstatements. They went out with statements about how good their ESG engine is. And crucially and crazily, they went out with the number that there's 459 billion euros of assets under management tied to ESG strategies. And clearly, with the annual report coming out, they figured it was just a very quick emotional decision. The best way, let's just crush her, get rid of her. It's easier to kill the sustainability officer and continue than make the changes and the restatements that she wanted. So I put together the 5-page dossier of all the issues and why I believe I've been fired in retaliation to speaking up about the problems. And I do talk about greenwashing. And I list all the emails, the risk reports, my strategy reports. And I said, I think I've been fired because I blew the whistle on 2 things. Number 1, greenwashing. And the second thing was loose financial controls, or just loose controls, bad compliance, because there was a lot that was wrong there. For example, the immense use of WhatsApp. My DWS email never worked. Isn't that crazy? The 8 months I was there, they could never get Desiree.Fixler@dws.com to work. So,
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And one of the board members called me up and said, "Hey, Desiree, don't worry about that. Here, take down this number. This is WhatsApp. And this is the best way to communicate, particularly on sensitive matters." You're just kind of like, this is a board member saying this. Like, what the fuck? You're not allowed
And
to
we
do
all
that.
know that WhatsApp is not a safe place.
Of course not.
for
Well,
communication.
Deutsche Bank just got fined by the U.S. regulators $200 million for that WhatsApp use. You're not allowed. It's a regulatory breach because on all business conversations, it has to be recorded. It has to be held within the company's archives. You can't go off platform. Of course, you can use WhatsApp, but you can't use WhatsApp for business matters. And everybody knows this. And so there were tremendous compliance breaches. It was a very loose ship. I put that together and I send it on March, I think it was 17th. And I send it to Carl van Roer, who's the chairman of DWS, chairman of the supervisory
I'm sorry,
board.
he's the chairman of DWS,
Yes.
and he's member of the board of Deutsche Bank.
That's
Kai
right.
van Roer.
Yeah, that's right. He's the president of Deutsche Bank and the chairman of the supervisory board for DWS. And I write to Jörg Eigendorf. I worked very closely with Eigendorf because he was the group sustainability head.
Of Deutsche Bank.
Yes, and the 2 companies are inseparable. DWS was considered just a division at Deutsche Bank. So I have effectively a line into Deutsche Bank, into Eigendorf. And so I write to both of them and they don't respond. The next thing you know, on March 24th, Carl writes back to me to say, "Sorry, Des, this is just an employment matter at DWS, nothing to do with me." And of course I write back, "It does, you're the chairman of the supervisory board." But on March 24th, it's an important date because Carl writes back to say, "We're not going to meet with you. We don't care. This is just your little employment matter." Same day, Bloomberg publishes an article that absolutely publicly discredits me. They say that I got fired, and they refer to an internal memo that Azoka had written to the entire company. It's a passive-aggressive internal memo, and it effectively says I underperformed and I have questionable business ethics. So now, not only am I fired, I'm now globally discredited, publicly discredited.
So
Bloomberg.
let's get that straight. You did not go public.
No.
It was them
Yes.
who went public at the
Yes.
time and discredited you and talked about things that weren't supposed actually for the public.
That's right.
Usually if you fire somebody, you don't have a...
You don't air your dirty laundry. Yeah, you don't air your dirty
Yeah,
laundry.
it's
This
just
is
bad style.
Absolutely. The firm was also tarnishing my name with journalists across the street. They were making up all kinds of crazy stories that I was trying to steal money from their platform. I was a really bad character. I was fired for cause. They made up dirt against me.
Desiree, let's move forward. And so they went public, and only months later did you go public.
That's correct.
Why did it take you a while to react?
I didn't know what to do. I was traumatized. I was in shock, disoriented. Not only was I fired and publicly discredited, but they went to immigration office because I was living in Germany, and they basically had me expelled from the country. I was thrown out of my home. I was homeless.
With your kids?
Yes, my kids and I are homeless at this time. I decide at this time the best thing to do is get another job. So I start interviewing. The problem is that the Bloomberg article is there, and there's an elephant in the room. So I have a great network and I can get the meetings, but everyone's saying, Des, come on, something happened here. You were fired for cause. What did you do? And I said, no, I wasn't fired for cause. And so I thought it best at this time not to, again, talk about the matter and just say, listen, there were differences of opinion, and I'm not there anymore. But no one would pick me up, and everyone was convinced I did something wrong. And now I'm realizing there were two things that were happening. I'm realizing I'm not going to get a job, and secondly, Azoka and DWS and Deutsche Bank start ratcheting up their ESG propaganda. So they start increasing all the hyperbole about their ESG greatness. They really doubled down on the greenwashing.
It's really a shame that they didn't understand what you were all about and what you were trying to do.
And also, I really think that there was a gender aspect. They figured, so, the little girl, single mom of 3, right? We can crush her. We're the big corporation. We'll never hear from her again. She'll never get another job. She's gone. I'm realizing, wow, it's going to be really difficult to move on with my life. And I'm getting really pissed off listening to all of their bullshit ESG statements. So I start doing, some Google searches, and it's the truth, life after whistleblowing. And I start looking up people like Gretchen Carlson, who took on Roger Ailes on Fox News about all the sexual discrimination happening, that happened at Fox News. I read about Susan Feller, who was the whistleblower at Uber. She took on and wrote about their misogynistic culture and all the misconduct. And what I realized is that while it's very hard, all of these folks made such incredible positive impact and reinvented themselves afterwards. They regained their truth and their narrative. And I said, I took inspiration from such people. And I understand I can probably kiss my corporate career goodbye and that I will have to reinvent myself. But I can reinvent myself as somebody fighting against greenwashing.
Who's in the driver's seat?
Yes. Let me embrace what got me fired and seek corporate reform here. Hold companies to account for their bullshit ESG statements. And so I knew...
So this is your transformation from a victim to a heroine.
Yeah, gosh, it's hard for me to see myself like that. But yes, from victim to now controlling my own narrative and taking control of things. Absolutely. And fighting back.
So that's when you decided to talk to the Wall Street Journal.
Yes. So I knew somebody fairly senior there, and we had dinner, and I told him, I said, I think I got fired in retaliation to my greenwashing complaints internally, and I have the evidence. Would this be a story that you guys would investigate? And he said, yes, absolutely. I think it was like, fuck yes, Des. They did their own investigation, and they came out with their article on August 1st. It was a very nerve-wracking situation because once you hand that over to a media outlet, it's no longer your story, it's their story. They came out with their article, and I thought it was a great article. It was very balanced. And 2 days later, once that article came out, a couple of days later, I received a call from the U.S. authorities that they had opened up an investigation, and they asked me if I would become a voluntary witness in their investigation. So I know...
What about the German authorities?
No, they did not call me.
The BaFin?
No, they did not. It was the press that prodded the BaFin and the information that the U.S. authorities were investigating. Then the BaFin decided, then the BaFin wrote to me and asked to speak to me. But that was only after they found out that the U.S., all 3 agencies, the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI, and the SEC was investigating. And the press started hounding them for comments like, are you investigating it? And then they came to me.
So the Wall Street Journal publishes accusations on the biggest asset manager in Germany, and the BaFin that reported into the Federal Ministry of Finance, which was headed at that time by Olaf Scholz, did not react.
That's correct. They did not react. No. They only reacted. The press started prodding them. The BaFin jumped in. Very different from the U.S. authorities. The U.S. authorities were extremely thorough about understanding everything. The BaFin, not so much. I always felt with the BaFin that there was a reluctance to investigate it. They didn't want to investigate it. They didn't want to know. And Stephanie, that brings up another point I'd like to make is the following. When I was deciding to go public, I went to the press because I knew I would not have safe harbor with the BaFin.
As a whistleblower.
Yes, I did not trust the BaFin. What I was told is that the BaFin can turn on whistleblowers. There were stories out there that the BaFin had turned and had informed the company about the whistleblower and sided with the company against the whistleblower. There is new leadership at the BaFin, and I hope there is a cultural overhaul. And I do hope that the BaFin reforms itself and recognizes its responsibility is investor protection and market stability, right? And that means providing whistleblower protection.
That's a very strong statement. Getting back to the course of events, your story in the Wall Street Journal broke in August 21. And then in May 22, Deutsche Bank and DWS were raided by Bundeskriminalamt and prosecutors. So this seems to be a very long story. What has happened since at DWS? We were talking about 460 billion euros of assets under management that were labeled sustainable, and you know they are not. What did they do with that?
So this was one of the greatest days of victory or validation. When they published their annual report for 2021, they published this in March 2022. They revised down their ESG assets under management by 75%. They also noted that they would no longer use their smart integration ESG framework. So the two main things I called for, they did. And that for me was the greatest validation.
But wait a minute, Desiree, if you change the data by 75% within a year within your annual reports, you cannot get away with that. That's fraud. You know, people don't know a lot about asset managers, but in fact, they are the ones that allocate the money. They decide where the money goes in this world. It's super important they have moral standards of where they put their money and that they are reliable and trustworthy. From what we know, DWS is now under scrutiny by the FBI, the US Department of Justice, the Bundeskriminalamt, and all the US and German financial supervisors. But we don't hear a lot about what's going on. Where is that headed? Will there still be the Big Bang?
There has been one guilty verdict levied. The Department of Justice announced that Karl von Rohr and Deutsche Bank violated their deferred prosecution agreement. So in January of 2020, because of regulatory breaches that had to do with bribery and loose anti-money laundering controls, they were under a deferred prosecution agreement with the Department of Justice. And what that stipulated is if there are any complaints of misconduct, whether it's external or internal, that has to be reported to the Department of Justice in New York. So when I wrote my complaint letter to Karl von Rohr, he has to inform the U.S. Justice Department about my complaint. I was a senior person. I was a sustainability officer. It went directly to Karl. It's incumbent on him to let the U.S. authorities know. He did not do it. And in that was a violation. And the U.S. announced that. So they do have a guilty verdict right now. But that was, Deutsche Bank kind of burying my complaint and, not meeting me, not dealing with it, and not informing them. What's going to happen with the rest of the investigation, I don't know.
What's the worst thing that could happen for DWS and Deutsche Bank?
It would be a huge fine and people being personally liable. Look, eventually, Deutsche Bank and DWS did do the right thing. Azoka was fired. He was ousted. And let's be honest, half the senior leaders at DWS have been pushed out. So you've got the COO left, the CIO left, the global head of communications left, some other folks in ESG. So you're seeing, the new CEO, Stefan Hoops, making right decisions, right, to clear house and to put in more competent leaders in the position. I hope that they've learned from this incident so that they no longer take the cowboy approach and take shortcuts, but instead have competent people in senior management positions, to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work, with integrity and serve their clients and stakeholders well and the community well.
But Karl von Rohr, who is the chairman of the supervisory board of DWS, is still around, at least right now as we're speaking. And Christian Sewing, the head of Deutsche Bank, is also still around.
Yes.
In the end, they are the responsible people, and they did not lose their jobs.
No, I don't know how much, Sewing knew or didn't know, but I know that Karl knew everything. How Karl could still be in the seat is astounding. I don't understand it at all.
So the end is still open of that story.
Yes, it is.
But what we can say is that really was an earthquake. And in a way, you got your will in the end because they had to reclassify hundreds and hundreds of billions of euros of assets under management.
Yes.
So we can check that box here. How did this earthquake, how did your going public in the Wall Street Journal change the way people do business in general? I'm not just talking about the financial community, but all the other industries. What do you see?
When the story broke, it rippled through the industry, culminating, I think, really, the major earthquake took place, of course, with the police raid in May of 2022. A lot of senior executives reached out to me. Again, it usually starts with, holy shit, Desiree. And to say that, I had one very large asset manager tell me that immediately that day, they had an all hands on deck meeting to discuss it and to say, the CEO said, I told you guys to do ESG right, but now I want everyone to check everything once again. We are not going to be the next DWS. And I think quite a few companies, had that all hands on deck global call to say, pause the conveyor belt on ESG product. I want everyone to review everything, every single label, what's in every fund, go over all of our marketing material, make sure we're delivering on our statements, on our commitments, and make sure we don't have a greenwashing scandal. And I think that exercise is very good. I think the response from the market was a very healthy response, right? We were living under a green asset bubble. There was irrational exuberance in ESG investing. This market needed that green asset bubble to be popped. It needed this correction. And we weren't moving the needle. So billions were being mobilized into ESG strategies, and yet carbon emissions continued to rise. I don't know about you, but I don't see more social justice or environmental justice these days either. And so I think that this backlash to ESG is a healthy one. I kind of draw a parallel to the dot-com bubble.
Mm-hmm. This growing pains, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We needed this correction. And like we had seen from the ashes of the dot-com collapse in the early 2000s, a lot of the weak players are weeded out, and it gives rise to the more credible, competent, and stronger players.
ESG is about responsible business. And the way it's being done, in your case at least, is so irresponsible. What I learned from what you say is we need not just laws. We have good laws, very, very high standards, at least in the EU. But what we need is law enforcement.
Yes.
And you enabled that. I think that's the greatest thing that's happening here.
Yes.
And everybody has to see that.
The Bundeskriminalamt has done more to tackle and combat greenwashing than the hundreds of EU legislation and regulation that has come out. That one action, that police raid, has sent shivers across Wall Street with one message: do not exploit, do not use ESG to mislead and missell products. Do not exploit sustainability. Do not use it as a marketing scheme. You have to be evidence-based and you have to be truthful with your clients. So I absolutely agree that regulation without enforcement is form over substance. And what we've seen from the Bundeskriminalamt in raiding Deutsche Bank, they've shown that. Now, it's still under investigation. We have to wait to see. But the clear message they sent out to the market was this could happen to you.
You won't get away with greenwashing. And greenwashing is not a marketing problem. It's a legal problem. This whole experience underscores the difficulties and the pressure that money managers are facing to plant their flag in this wonderful corner, the hottest corner of the fund market, which is, as you say, the ESG market. And that's a good sign that people are asking for sustainable products. But on the other hand, the truth is we don't even have enough truly sustainable investment opportunities. And that's why I still cannot believe what you're saying, because DWS got away with the story that over half of their assets under management are quote unquote sustainable. Again, 460 billion euros, that's just so much money. And we could have all seen from 1,000 miles away that there aren't as many sustainable investment opportunities in the whole world, and certainly not within one asset manager. So everybody failed, the whole system, the supervisory board, the auditors. Was that KPMG, by the way?
Yes, KPMG.
Yes. Then the public, of course, all the other institutions in the financial community, the media failed, the investors didn't ask the right questions, the customers just bought the story that Asoka Wörmann told them. They'd never questioned it. Why can a system fail in such a way? And my second question, why don't we talk about that every day? Why isn't that a big thing in the media?
For a number of reasons. It's everything to make money quickly. We have wrong incentives. Those companies that say they have compensation linked to ESG metrics, well, what are they? DWS, like one of their ESG targets was to have, I think Asoka was calling for having 26% women in management. Why 26? Why would he got paid like, I think it was like an extra 1 million euros for a really lackluster, unambitious target.
Just for the target.
That was just 26%. Well, why is that a good target? Why can't the target be 50? Why can't we be equal? And what I loved is that was a target on numbers, not pay gap. Oh no, that wouldn't be touched. If you really want equality, look at the pay gap for underrepresented minorities and for women.
Could the whole DWS thing have happened in London or New York?
No. Something like this, it would be very hard to believe. And I'll say this, even at Deutsche Bank, something like this can happen at Deutsche Bank Frankfurt. It would be next to impossible for this to happen at Deutsche Bank London and New York. There's more competence in management to know that you need to handle a situation like this sensitively.
What does that mean for Germany's reputation? We've had the diesel scandal of Volkswagen, we've had Wirecard. What do you see on an international scale? Where are we headed?
Yeah, corporate Germany has taken some hits, and there are some news stories that there isn't enough stringent corporate governance. And folks have looked at the rules for supervisory boards, that corporate governance rules need to be beefed up there because a lot of supervisory boards are kind of lame duck boards, and that the regulator has up until now had a very light touch. The BaFin has tended to enforce on smaller companies and given a free pass to the larger companies. And even when they do come up with an enforcement action, it's like a speeding ticket, right? So you've got, just take Deutsche Bank's billions of fines were levied against it from the Department of Justice and the SEC. And most recently, like the BaFin levied a fine of like 8 million euros, right? It's a little slap on the hand. There needs to be a corporate governance overhaul, and supervisory boards need to have more teeth. I think there needs to be also more shareholder activism in Germany. Right now, it's very difficult for shareholders to band together to take class action suits against companies. I think that's considered collusion in Germany. That needs to be addressed. And that is the main reason why it would not have happened in New York or London. The complaint letter that I wrote to the chairman was a bombshell. It's a bombshell letter. There would have to be real action. It would have had to have been seriously taken. It's unlikely that a company would then try and crush the sustainability officer. And remember something, Deutsche Bank had so many occasions. There were so many occasions to meet with me, to understand, to hire a third-party investigator here. They chose not to make those decisions. They've spent tens of millions of dollars in legal fees, in PR fees, in crisis management fees, and they always get it wrong. There is this strategy just to always deny. Of course course something was wrong. I think it says a lot. But this is where the gender aspect comes in. And I do think that working in Germany as a female, you have more headwinds. There's more bias, I believe, in the German market compared to working in New York or London. And I think that these folks that were privy to my case, I definitely think that there's a misogynistic angle to this, that they just thought no woman, no single mother would stand up to the, big and mighty, their Vorstand members. These very short-sighted people really thought that they could crush me, and there was no way that I could handle that and speak out about that. And they could have gotten through this, but they mishandled it. And so when it came to the PR battle, that one I can call a victory on to date.
Speaking of today, who are you today? I was asking you in the beginning of the conversation who you used to be. And after this very, very exciting story that you have lived through, what would you say? Who are you today?
I'm professionally different. With regard to who I am as a person, I haven't changed. That's why I did what I did. Professionally, I've changed a great deal. I understood that I needed to reskill. I needed to reinvent myself. And to get through the hard times, stay very focused on getting my truth out, making sure the market, the regulators understood what happened. And I knew I had to reskill. I needed to learn how the press works, how the media works. I needed to become more comfortable in public speaking. I used to be terrified to take the stage, terrified in front of a camera. I needed to reskill in writing opinion pieces. I needed to reskill in learning how to work LinkedIn and Twitter. So there's been a tremendous professional metamorphosis that I've gone through, and I had to figure out a business plan to make money. I am a single mom of 3. I need to make money. And I haven't earned much money. I was fired. No one wanted to touch me. And the advisory gigs didn't come in until the market saw validation. Validation in March 2022 when DWS restated everything. Validation with the police raid. Validation with my commitment and focusing on talking about best practice and calling for reforms, identifying what is best practice, what does good look like. And so I've thrown myself in the mix there, working with others in trying to raise the bar on industry practice and also calling for standardization with regard to ESG definitions, standardization with regard to ESG reporting. And so finally, thankfully, I was awarded with some great advisory gigs, and that culminated in December when I was appointed to, and I'm really excited about this one, appointed to the FCA's ESG Advisory Committee. That's the Financial Conduct Authority. That's the BaFin of the UK.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
They made a very smart move hiring you.
And I want to do something, by the way, that's like a big bee in my bonnet and a big focus for me, is to do more about whistleblower protection and creating safe harbors for whistleblowers. That's my big cause here. And in countries like Germany that have now adapted whistleblower protection to make sure it's practiced as such, it's for the good of companies. Whistleblowers should not be seen as traitors. They love the company so much. That's why they want to see the company do better. They're willing to risk their own career for that.
Thank you. I am so humbled by what you have been saying. Thank you so much. And let me say thank you for making this world a better place.
Thank you.
I've learned a lot and you've done a wonderful job. It's now everybody else's job to listen to you, to understand what we can do better. And we will take time to work it out and really work on higher standards of corporate governance. I think this is the bottom line here. And also higher moral standards of the individual. That's what we need to get a truly sustainable business going.
Well said. Thank you.
Desiree, I wish you the best of luck. I wish you that your voice is being heard. It was wonderful talking to you.
It was wonderful talking to you too. Thank you again.
Thank you. I could have talked to Desiree forever because there's just so much we can learn from her. And the bottom line here is we need much higher standards for corporate governance. That's why I want to continue that journey with you and discuss what kind of people we need, how we have to structure our organizations, and how we can develop the corporate culture in order to achieve truly sustainable business. In my next episode, which will be in German again, I will speak to Katharina von Frankenberg, corporate governance expert at the leadership consultancy and executive search company Egon Zehnder.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Planetary Business. This is an independent podcast and not funded by ads. If you want to support this podcast, give us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify and tell everyone you know about it.